Hey there, everybody. My name is Cabot Phillips, and I'm the editor-in-chief at Campus Reform. We're joined today by Congressman Ben Cline of Virginia to talk about his new Use Your Endowment Act that is being proposed in Washington, D.C. Congressman Cline, thanks for joining us.
Hey, great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
So, okay, I'm going to let you describe to the viewers what you're proposing and why you think it's important. I figure I'll give you the chance first before I try and describe myself.
Sure. So during this coronavirus pandemic, Congress has only come into session about 3 times to pass critical legislation to help those in need, to try and help develop a vaccine, to try and help get testing out there, but also to help small businesses to make it through this critical time by keeping their employees hired and working, and to help with $1,200 payments to every man, woman, and child in America, $500 payments to children. But one thing we noticed when we passed the CARES Act to provide all this critical support was that there were some folks who were unintended beneficiaries of the funds, essentially eligible and receiving this CARES Act funding through the PPP without while they have endowments of their own. So you have Harvard University with $32 billion of endowment being eligible and indicating they would receive PPP money to help them with handling this coronavirus pandemic. But with an endowment like that, it was my view and Josh Hawley of Missouri's view, senator from Missouri's view, that they needed to tap their own endowment before they got to access any public funding. And that's what this bill would do.
And so that's something that we were sounding the alarm on as well at Campus Reform, was pointing out that Harvard's endowment is larger than the economy of 80 to 100 countries on Earth. And why are they not tapping into that? And so you set the limit there at $10 billion, I believe, on schools of $10 billion or above with endowments there. So how do you choose that line? And, for schools that are right on that line, what are you saying to them?
Good question. The $10 billion line really was meant to illustrate just how high these endowments are, because Harvard's is $32 billion, Yale's is 20, University of Texas is 20, Stanford's is 18, Princeton's is 18, and Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT, is 11. Those are the 6 universities that it would apply to. Now, if you extend it down to $1 billion, you pick up about 20 different universities. I think the University of Virginia is number 20. And I don't think the University of Virginia should be availing itself of funds that were meant for small businesses and maintaining employees, because the University of Virginia and all of these institutions are not small businesses. They're huge enterprises. But we wanted to point out that with a $32 billion endowment, to put it in perspective, the Commonwealth of Virginia, where I live, their annual budget is around $50 billion. So not too much bigger than Harvard's endowment. So that's an enormous amount of money. They need to be using that money to help their students through this difficult time, not using taxpayer dollars to do so. These institutions, if they were using funds toward research programs, health research, vaccine research, testing for the coronavirus, things like that, they may be able to qualify. But for these institutions to take advantage of taxpayer dollars and then use them for the various liberal programs that they have, the various types of non-scientific liberal arts studies, that's not what this money was intended for, and that's not what it should be used for.
Received bipartisan support on this. Is this something people from across the aisle have been receptive to?
Well, I think that most of our support is coming from the Republican side of the aisle. I don't think that we've picked up any Democrat co-sponsors as of yet, but hope springs eternal. We hope that those on both sides of the aisle who realize that this money needs to be targeted to address the coronavirus pandemic. It needs to go to those most in need, families who have lost their jobs, unemployment systems, testing for the virus, making sure that universities use their endowment when it comes to keeping their students safe and being on campus and starting their campus back up again this fall. We want everybody to start up this fall, but we want them to do it safely. We just think they should be using their own endowments to do that.
And so, I think if people were polled on this issue, I imagine most Americans in both political parties would likely be supportive of it, something hopefully Democrat congressmen would take into account with their constituencies. But the university's response to this, and we've reached out to a lot of universities asking why they haven't dipped into their resources the way that average American families are before taking all this bailout money. And their response many times is, well, the money in our endowments is tied up very strictly. We have, very fine line laid out on what we're allowed to spend that money on. Much of it isn't liquid. It's tied up in all sorts of other things and endeavors. What's your response to universities when they say, well, we can't just pull money out to spend on helping people?
Well, I think that they can work a little bit harder to utilize the money that is available and is liquid to taking the place of where they would be using this taxpayer fund. It's going to be tough for families to get by through this pandemic. It's going to be tough for small businesses to get by. It's not going to be tough for Harvard with $32 billion to be able to get through this. And they have an army of accountants and an army of lawyers. They should be able to make available enough funds to get through the next couple of months, because that's what this funding was provided for, to get through the next couple of months and come out ahead. And so this fall, we'd love for all our universities to be open and operating, but we want them to do it safely. We want them to do it cautiously, but we want them to do it with their own money.
And so in closing, would this be retroactive? So if a university with an endowment above $10 billion had accepted this money, if this were passed, would it be retroactive to where they had to give the money back?
Yes, because while those 6 institutions, Harvard was the one that kind of caught the most flack because they are number one. Their endowment is the largest, but all of those institutions, those Ivies plus the UT system, have enough money to get through this next few months to make sure that the money that was intended for taxpayers, intended for small business owners, goes to the purpose that it was meant for, and not just to keep these Ivy walls and institutions functioning.
All right, we will leave it there. Congressman Ben Cline introducing HR 6651, the Use Your Endowment Act, holding universities accountable, making sure that they're not taking taxpayer money if they've got billions of dollars on hand to weather this storm, an issue that has had people very fired up this month. So I'm sure a lot of our viewers will be happy to hear that leaders in Washington are taking some action on this. So Congressman Cline, we appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me.